Hey, everybody. It is Saturday. I think it's, 2 p.m.? Yeah, 2 p.m. here in Seoul. This episode was recorded a week ago, but we're doing the recording for this now. It's going to be released in 2 days. It is winter here in Seoul. I love it. It's getting nice and cozy. It's a good time to stay inside, play some games, hang out. I just saw that Half-Life VR was announced. Holy fucking shit. That is crazy. I'm very curious to see if that is going to succeed because, VR has always sort of been a gimmick. I think we've really had yet to have a major, I would say, epic single-player experience, especially something on the scale of Half-Life. I guess I'm not that surprised that they would have made it VR. Now that it's announced, it makes sense at least because they were always trying to push the envelope with FPS specifically. With the Half-Life franchise, they always had to go to the next level. For those of you guys who are, I guess, a lot younger than me, Half-Life 2 was the first game where it wasn't sprites. When you shot down a character, the 3D animation stayed there. You could actually circle around it. All of the FPS games before that, it was basically a drawing that you were firing at. So you'd circle around that, and it would turn with you. And so I guess this is the next step for FPS, but crazy news, new Half-Life game finally coming out. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. This episode, and this is all, of course, perfectly in line with FPS, I got to sit down with CSGO caster Moses. So if you're a Starcraft person, you're not familiar with Moses, he is one of the great CSGO casters. I think CSGO has some of the very best casting in all of esports. We got to talk about a lot of cool shit. He was actually just randomly here in Korea on vacation, and when I realized there was a CSGO caster here, it's like Pokemon, man. I got to fucking get that interview with a guy who's not from my game. There's very little crossover with Counter-Strike and Starcraft at events, which is kind of weird because these are the two original esports. The only time I get to see CSGO casters is usually very briefly when we share the green room at Intel Extreme Masters in Katowice in Poland. So I did get to hang out with him. We got to get some drinks, and he came over to my house and was nice enough to give me some of his time to talk about Counter-Strike and Valve and a lot of stuff. This is a really cool episode. I think you guys are going to enjoy it. So again, special thanks to him for taking his time to do this with me. And one quick reminder before we start, as we always do, there is an after show with Moses and me that continues on from where the podcast left off for Patreon supporters only. So if you want to get access to that, it's patreon.com/Tasteless podcast. The money there goes to continue to support this podcast, to help us buy equipment, to help pay for editing, all that stuff. So if you want that, now you know how to get it. And without further ado, let's go into this episode with Moses and I. So before we got up here, you were mentioning that who was the player that went on Joe Rogan?
Jordan Gilbert. Nothing.
Jordan Gilbert, yeah. And you said that when he met Joe Rogan, he didn't want to talk to him until the mics were on.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that'd be different for a guest that Joe already knows.
Yeah.
But that was just a funny story to me where it was just like, let's not talk. Let's make sure all the conversations are authentic. Like, I don't want to get to like a funny or a cool story and then have to kind of lead back into it not authentically.
Yeah, I was thinking about that because a lot of times when I pick people up to bring them down here, I'm thinking, fuck, I wish the mics were on already. But now that I'm hearing that, I might have a different system in place.
Just lav them up from the train.
Yeah, maybe have Ryan grab them or something and then bring them up here. So you're going to Shanghai tomorrow, right?
Yeah, Shanghai tomorrow for an event. I was in Beijing last week for a different Counter-Strike event.
Okay. And if you're a Counter-Strike caster, you're just on the road forever. Is that correct?
Yeah, this is, I'm lucky. This is a little vacation in the middle of it, which you don't normally get, but this is the trip that I'm on right now is about 6 weeks straight on the road. I was in Turkey and then Sweden and then Copenhagen and then straight to Beijing and now here in Korea for vacation with my girlfriend and then Shanghai next week and then I finally get to go home. So this year I did 300 days on the road. Last year was about 300 days on the road as well.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Is that good? I mean, do you feel like you're built to be somebody who can travel? Because I feel like most people cannot handle that much moving around?
I would say I definitely can't handle it, but the fact that I get to travel the world and do Counter-Strike for a living is like, you know what it's like. You have that game Starcraft for you that you just loved. And
Right.
if I had to do a different job, if I was like doing like an office or a consulting job for like, economics, I don't know, what any other job, if it wasn't esports, if it wasn't Counter-Strike related, I would have dropped out of this crazy ass schedule a long time ago.
Is there an off season though? Is there a period
No.
where everybody just goes home?
No, we have that weird situation where it's been a big talking point in Counter-Strike for the past year or two. Is like, do we want to go into like a more franchise or exclusive model, the way that League of Legends or LCS is, or do you want to keep an open system? And obviously, there's positives and negatives to both. But Counter-Strike is a scene that's deathly afraid of the franchise and the exclusive model. But we also have sucked so much at organizing the open system. So we just end up with this like jambalaya of Counter-Strike where it's just like, ESL does their 8 events, DreamHack does their 2 pro events, StarLadder does 4 events, and anyone who wants to come in who has money can throw a Counter-Strike event on this level and get the big teams to go there. So we just have no structure, and here you are.
Does that cause some degree of confusion if you're a Counter-Strike fan, where you're not sure which tournament's the most important?
I think as the hardcore Counter-Strike audience probably doesn't have that issue, but I think it's one of the big things that's stunting our development and our growth as an esport is that if you're a casual fan and you tune in for like, the 2 majors that we have, which are the Valve sponsored events, and you're like, man, this event was awesome. I loved watching these playoff games. I would love to follow Counter-Strike more in depth. This game is sweet to watch. And then you come in as a new fan, you're just like, what's important? Because if you see 2 events or 3 events and then like maybe you're off for a month and you come back and you're not up to date on all the knowledge, so you don't know which events are important. A hardcore Counter-Strike fan is going to say something like, oh, it doesn't matter that Astralis did bad at this event because, this event really isn't that big of a deal in the context of the pro scene. But the casual fan doesn't know that. So it's hard. I would imagine it's very difficult for a casual fan to get involved on any kind of meaningful level.
Because a lot of people that I talk to point to Counter-Strike as the big success story in
gold standard,
esports.
yeah.
Yeah, because every time I tune into a Counter-Strike event, I feel like it's supposed to be the biggest thing in the world.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like the production's really good. It's always super hype, but I've never there is no like one major tournament at the end of the year to crown a world champion. Is it just viewed as okay, the best in the world is the one that won the last tournament? Is that how it's perceived?
I think with the amount of events that we have for me personally, it usually takes about 2 months to kind of figure out any major shift in the rankings for me in my mind, which for some of the top teams in the world, 2 months might be 4 events or so, something like that. But it is difficult to kind of establish that, and I think that's what most TOs are trying to do. ESL just announced their organized pro tour. They have the Intel Grand Slam, which is like the one unifying thing we have for CS events, but. Yeah, it's tough to kind of to figure that out. We do a really bad job of build up to events, and most of that is because we don't have the time to build up. When you want to build up to an exciting event or you want to grow the excitement or the hype, it's what is the marketing, what is the content like leading up to that event? And we have so many events throughout the schedule that there is none. The buildup is how a team did it, a competitor's event. So we have the 2 majors, which are kind of held as our like crowning achievements of some of the best teams in the world. And like this will establish this team as the best. And then I think ESL 1 Cologne and IEM Katowice are the other 2 events that have really like standalone proven that they are like a top tier major level event. So like we kind of have those 4 events that are kind of like the parameters that we have throughout the year.
One of the things I was wondering is that, so like when StarCraft 2 came out, there was events everywhere. Like there was a period where we had a GSL finals here in Korea. There was one major tournament going on in Sweden, and then there was another, I think it was an MLG tournament going on in New York, and it was all in the same day.
Yeah.
And Blizzard basically said there's too much market confusion. Nobody knows what they're supposed to watch.
Yep.
And that's when they implemented WCS. But that also crashed StarCraft 2 pretty heavily because I guess also League of Legends was on the rise, and there was other various factors here. But yeah, it seemed like it hit the game really, really hard. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering what would have happened with StarCraft if they had just left it alone. Because CSGO is the model where Valve is, from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, Valve's really hands off. Right?
I'd say you're wrong. I'd say hands off is an overstatement.
There's no hands.
They've got no hands.
They have no hands at all. So, because Blizzard's super hands on, but at times I feel like it's been to the detriment of the game. But CS:GO is, I think in some metrics, the largest esport. Is that in part because the marketplace is allowed to compete?
Yeah, I would imagine that's a big part of it. But I think also it's just a matter of time. Like I know, and maybe it's always tough for me because I feel like my opinions, while probably well, definitely extremely valid. I don't know if like because I'm so involved in it that I have like a different view, because I feel like I tend to have a very negative view of what we have going on in Counter-Strike. Like I'm with you. I think having those like, well, I don't really know what your opinion is, but we have that same problem where we have weekends where there's 4 tournaments going on at once.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why are we doing this to ourselves? And this is where I think the conversation is odd, because I have no problem with people criticizing, the negatives and wanting and being so fearful of an exclusive or a locked in, a closed off system for professional play. But let's at least be honest about the deficiencies of this open system that we have, because we don't really have an open system. We don't have any organization whatsoever in our professional circuit. It's just like, who's got money, who wants to throw an event, how many of the top teams can you get there, and let's go, let's roll the dice. And I think that is almost even worse in a way than having an exclusive system. Like it's kind of scary. Like I'm doing an event at the end of the year in Bahrain for Blast Pro Series, and on that weekend I think that's the last event of the year. That weekend there's going to be a Beyond the Summit, which is a more casual event out in California, and then there's going to be like an ESEA, which is like a semi-pro division. It's for like the tier 2 teams or the upcoming teams and players to compete in. And I'm just like, we're wrecking ourselves. We're just constantly competing with ourselves. Like, never mind all the other esports or all the other streamers you have to like compete for viewership with. We're competing with Counter-Strike, with more Counter-Strike. And I think that's a detriment, because that happens frequently throughout the year. There's probably one weekend a month where there's like three to 5 tournaments. I think it was in October we had one weekend I was working an event where there were 6 Counter-Strike tournaments going on at once, and each of them had at least 2 pro teams at it. And I was just like, what the fuck? I don't know what to do about that. Like,
yeah,
how does that even happen?
Gosh, yeah. See, now I didn't know it was this pronounced, because
it's pretty tough.
Whenever I get on Twitch, I kind of click through and see what's going on, and it seems like there's always a Counter-Strike event happening.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's no. I guess lots of tournaments is good, but if you don't have one tournament that's supposed to sum them all up,
right? It's what the majors are supposed to be in theory.
Yeah.
But the problem with the majors that they have is the majors are all seeded and ranked off the previous major. So we'll have a major in like March, and then 6 months later in August we have another major. But there's 6 months where there's been, I guess it would have to be something like 20 professional events in that 6-month period, or 15 professional events in that period, that don't actually impact a team's seeding. So if a team drops off, or a team gets really good, or a team changes their lineup completely, they still go off, your rankings from the previous major that was 6 months prior. So sometimes even the majors don't even accurately reflect what the scene is at that moment. It's reflecting what the scene was 6 months ago. So even as one of your capstone events, you're just like, can you really count these? Like, what happens if this team is actually ranked like top 3 in the world, but 6 months ago they were the 12th best team? So then they're seeded as the 12th best team.
Oh my god!
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, it's a very strange. It's a very strange thing to have happen, and it's. I think most of what's been going on towards the end of this year, we have another new league cropping up next year. We have 2 leagues that have been around for a number of time, the ESL Pro League and then the Blast Pro Series, that are restructuring the way their league is organized. So next year is going to be a big telling point, but that's kind of the year where everyone's looking at it and say, okay, we have to buckle down and organize this in a better fashion.
How does this affect pro gamers? Because I know when there was the big Starcraft 2 boom, one of the funny things that was happening for me as a caster, but also for the players, is that there was so much traveling, hardly anybody had any time to play. Like in the first year of Starcraft 2, I would have gone to, there was 1 month, I think I was in 3 different countries in a month. Yeah. Right? And there was a patch that had come out and I had no time to actually mess around in the game. Yeah,
we've had that too, yeah.
Yeah. So does this affect pros negatively?
Absolutely. I know. I mean, we had one team that got second place at the major in Katowice this year. The Finnish team called Ents, and they kind of established themselves as a top 3, top 5 team in the world over the course of 2 to 3 months, and then they made a roster change and they've just plummeted. And one of the things that they cited was the fact they didn't even have time to practice with the new lineup before they could really put it into play. Now, I mean, I'll be honest, that roster change was pretty pretty dumb on their part, in my opinion. I think they would have tanked no matter what to a certain degree. But that's just one example. The big thing is, if you want to make a roster change, it takes maybe a month or two. It takes, that level of practice to get back up to where you're feeling comfortable. But if you're not playing in the events, then your rankings drop, and your rankings kind of influence how you get direct invites to tournaments. So then all of a sudden, if you're not getting directly invited to tournaments, then you have to drop down and play in the qualifiers. So not only are you being invited to 2 events a month or 1 event a month, but you also have to play in the qualifier for 2 to 3 other events that month, and then that affects your travel even more. We've been in a situation in Counter-Strike where one of the big complaints that players had was, if we're going to go to an ESL event and then we also have to play in the online qualifier for like a competitors events, we need to have a practice room available because we just can't afford to not be able to play Counter-Strike for this week we're at events. So now we have a company like ESL paying extra money to get, to book out an extra hotel room to set up 5 PCs inside of it so that players can practice and teams can play their qualifying events for competitors, which is a very weird situation to be in. It's happening for online games. It's happening for qualifiers. The Counter-Strike scene, and this is where I think my opinion is very negative. I don't know how you are supposed to exist in this space as a TO because you're just getting stretched so thin, and you're also being forced to help competitors run their own events.
Yeah.
In that sense, it's a very weird situation to be in. But if you don't do that, then you get hit with the PR. Then the players are, some of the players, and I think they've gotten better at this over the years, will be like, man, it's bullshit that, so-and-so hasn't provided us with PCs to play in this other league's, tournament. And it's like, well, what the fuck? Like, what do you expect them to do?
Yeah. What's interesting is that I found everybody in every game that they're working in has got a lot of concerns. Like if you talk to a lot of people that work in Starcraft, they're concerned with Blizzard or just the state of RTS games or the way tournaments are being run. But by every game I've talked to, and I've talked to people in all different types of esports, there's always a lot of concern about how things are being handled.
I think part of that is, I think part of it for me, from what I witnessed, and maybe this is like a little bit of like my boomer viewpoint of everything, where it's just like in esports we love hand jobs. We love those like verbal hand jobs on Twitter of like, I love it every time I do a major, and it's like I got guys from like Hex and Fwiz and like all the Call of Duty guys have been like, man, CS:GO is like the best esports ever. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool as fuck. They really appreciate my esports, but I mean, like everyone realizes when they hit like 20 years old is hand jobs aren't that cool. Yeah. And like, it doesn't actually get you anything.
Yeah.
Like we just did, today was the esports awards ceremony, right?
Yeah.
And they announced League of Legends won best esports game of the year and Counter-Strike was second. And I know a lot of Counter-Strike fans, and as people loyal to one game and one esport will always say, Counter-Strike got robbed. It should have won that. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, no. League of Legends deserves that shit. Like Counter-Strike is not the best esport. Counter-Strike is probably the best esports game, but it is not the best esports product. Our scene is such a mess. And I think, we're at the point now where it's like, if we don't stop giving each other these hand jobs about how good of a game we have and how good of an esports we have, we can't actually address the problems because everyone is just so jacked up on how cool our game is compared to other scenes. Yeah. And it's just like, but there's so many problems we need to get to that we need to fix. Revenue streams for the TOs is an issue. How are we going to have an esport if our TOs can't even afford to make money? It's going to dry up at some point, all this investment.
What is it like with Valve being so hands off? Does that give you comfort, or does that infuriate you, or what is that like? And just for the people listening, if you were to look at Riot or Blizzard and how they handle their esports, they're very, very, very hands on. Yeah. Now Blizzard's in a bit of free fall here with the firings, and then there's many important people that are leaving Blizzard. So I don't know where they're going to be at exactly, but historically they were very hands-on. Right. And Riot, of course, is also completely present. Yeah. And actually completely in control of their
hands
esport.
And feet.
And hands and feet. And when I look at Valve, I don't know if I should be impressed or shocked or confused or what. They're just not there at all.
I have so many different opinions on this, and it's hard, and I feel like kind of like an asshole because I can't really give you a definitive answer. Like in one sense, first of all, I can't really blame them. They're devs who wanted to come in and code video games for a living. They didn't want to have to build an entire esports ecosystem, right. And they probably don't even necessarily have the business know-how to be able to manage all these different conflicting situations. So on that side, I'm just like, Yeah, that's fair play. Like, you guys just want it to be devs. You guys just want to make a cool video game, and
Yeah.
you're also succeeding. Even if I don't agree with all your decisions in terms of gameplay changes, you're succeeding. On the other hand, I think it's amazing that they're so hands off, because I do very much believe that, if this is something that's going to succeed, it's going to be the market that dictates it, not, a developer being so hands-on. And also, I look at a game like Overwatch where the developer is so involved in it. I'm just saying, what happens if the developer says this is like a waste of time and money, and then all of a sudden they pull out, and then that game just dies? I don't want that.
Well, they already did this
either.
with Heroes of the Storm,
right?
And
that scene just collapsed.
Yeah, that was the big. I think the big shock in all of gaming was that, you can just end this.
Yeah.
Because people, I think, especially with a company like Blizzard, were always under the impression that
Blizzard's usually been very loyal to their games over the years.
Yeah, and so to see them pull out, and then, even if you're someone who just played Heroes of the Storm for fun, I think that them pulling out of HGC, it kills the game in such an incredible way.
Yeah.
I mean, it really says
so definitively.
We don't care. Why would you even bother trying to play this game or get good when we won't even back it?
Yeah.
So
I mean, no, it's an interesting thing, right? Like, and I don't mind them being so hands off, except for the fact that I think where Counter-Strike really struggles compared to other games and other esports is we don't really have a very fleshed out like content creator system. Like, we don't have a whole lot of like Counter-Strike YouTubers. We have a few of them, and the ones that we do have do pretty well. But where I look at Valve and I say, we don't need you to be hands on with all of the esports and all the technical or all the know-how of organizing the scene, but like, why is your Twitter account not retweeting the content creators? Like, why are you not helping other people, and this will just be like a selfish example, but, if I want to make a Counter-Strike video, or if I want to make like a weekly video and updating about the esports scene, why am I not getting why are they not helping me, build my brand and grow my content that's then in turn going to help their game? It's a very simple thing for them. I'm not even doing that. So, I mean, I'm not trying to be, narcissistic about it, but that's where I feel like Counter-Strike is missing the most, is the content outside of the game. We obviously have more than enough esports and more than enough tournaments going on, but where's all the content that can generate more interest for the game?
I was always weirded out too when, because I actually play CSGO from time to time.
Yeah.
Me and some of my buddies, this is like the equivalent of like 30 and over intramural basketball game, because I'm not very good at CSGO, but I grew up playing it a lot.
So I was going to say, you're from that generation.
Yeah, I'm from that generation. It was basically Starcraft.
Everyone played Counter-Strike at some point. Counter-Strike and Starcraft and Quake were like the three games you could play.
The three games that were there. So whenever I try to get on, I'm always kind of surprised that it's, for instance, you can't play more than 2 games to get ranked. Do you know about this? Like, you can only play 2 ranked games a day. Whenever I try to get my friends in on this,
it could be. Listen, I even when I've had time at home, I still don't play matchmaking. I mean, that's just a funny story, because that just leads into the other thing with Valve is, if you want to be a serious Counter-Strike player, you don't use Valve's matchmaking system. You go to a third party.
Yeah, this is where this is actually what I was trying to lead into.
Okay.
Yeah,
perfect. You pay ESEA like $7 to $15 a month to play on their matchmaking. You pay Faceit, whatever, $10 a month to play on their system, and that's got the better anti-cheat. That's got the better and more streamlined match finding, automated service. ESEA has all the leagues attached to theirs as well. So I mean, that's just kind of a funny angle of it. But at the same time, ESEA has been around since 2004, 2005. So it'd almost be a shame if like Counter-Strike, if Valve came in and just destroyed that company that actually kept Counter-Strike alive in North America for over a decade. Like, if it wasn't for ESEA in North America, Counter-Strike wouldn't be a thing.
It's crazy when you look at Valve and what their business philosophy is, because I knew this guy high up in gaming that went to, I guess there's these big conferences where game developers basically share what they're trying to do. And the person from Valve that was at this conference basically said, we don't make anything anymore. Everybody makes stuff for us.
Yeah.
That's how we've won, is they own Steam.
Yep.
I mean,
Genius, by the way.
Genius.
I remember when Steam came out. You probably do too.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the fuck is this shit?
Yeah, and I'm like, wait, my games are just always there?
Yeah.
I don't have these scratch CD-ROMs that I have to, try to find.
I was weirded out. I was like, I don't even want to deal with this. Like, why do I have to re-download this game, this Counter-Strike that I had?
Yeah.
And then 20 years later, you're like, oh, that's actually a genius play. You guys won the game, literally.
Yeah. It's totally fascinating because it seems to have worked. I've actually heard, and I don't know if this is true, that Valve is the richest private company.
I've been told that as well.
Yeah.
I think it was like per employee, they make the most money per employee.
Yeah, yeah. There's
something
some
along
type
those
of
lines.
metric, but apparently it's just absurd how much they take in.
Well, I mean, this is the interesting part about the business in general, and also just focusing on Counter-Strike too, is like one thing Counter-Strike has never had is any sort of competitor.
Yeah.
There's never been anyone who's been able to, even Call of Duty as an FPS could never touch Counter-Strike in terms of, I mean, I shouldn't say that because I think COD obviously is a cool game and has an amazing competitive scene and history to it. And obviously it's massive, makes a shit ton of money. But no game has ever like really truly challenged Counter-Strike as an esports title. And nobody's ever truly challenged Valve as like a game distribution center. Now we have Epic coming in, so maybe that'll change things. And I know for people in Counter-Strike, we're kind of like, wonder what happens when Counter-Strike gets a competitor. I wonder if Valve is going to take a little bit more of a hands-on approach.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. Real quick question, too. I don't know how much you know about this, but do they handle Dota the exact same way, or is there a different model that they use?
In terms of their esports?
Yeah.
It's very different.
Okay, so that's what I had understood, but I wasn't
Well,
100%
okay,
sure.
let me say this. I cannot be sure because I've never actually confirmed it with the devs, but I know one of the philosophies that we've always been told, and at this point, I've heard it so many times over years that I'm not even sure really where the information came from to verify it, but I was told that devs between Dota and Counter-Strike, they want to do different approaches and see what works better. I know we've had a couple conversations with them, especially early on in Counter-Strike. We were asked if we wanted an international, and pretty much unanimously, the pros and people involved in CS esports said no, which I mean, who knows? That could have been a mistake. But they do things pretty differently. Dota has way more devs. I think Dota has like 3 or 4 times the developers that Counter-Strike has, and I think that fluctuates as well based off the way that Valve operates as a company. So we have different ecosystems, different people working on the games, and different philosophies on how to achieve, I guess, a similar goal. With
Valve being the way that they are is there any chance of them having like another CS or Counter-Strike come out? CSGO's actually got it for a while, but
2012 it came out. So
yeah.
It's getting to old age, I guess you'd mean.
Yeah. I mean, what?
I don't know. I guess that depends on like video game culture of these days. Because I mean, well, here's the weird thing is 1.6 lasted from 1999 until 2011, 2012.
And CS Source didn't take off the way they wanted it to. A lot of people still played on 1.6.
Source was cool. It had its own healthy, vibrant scene, and I've done my share of Source bashing, and I probably harbor a little bit more love for the game. And Counter-Strike, you're always like a 1.6 player or Source player.
Yeah.
That actually split the scene more than anything. And back then, at that point in time, it didn't necessarily matter because we didn't have a cohesive community that we do per game nowadays. But it is interesting is like how much longer can CSGO actually exist in this day and age where there's so many gamers and there's so many video games out there, and it's much more socially acceptable to be a gamer. And now everyone's looking for that next new title to come out, whether it's a streamer who's saying, I need to pounce and become, this game's streamer, or, whatever it might be. I'm very curious at what the attention span of today's gamers can actually be, because it's very different from when you and I were 18, 19, 20 years old and playing games. You've played Starcraft for 25 years now. I've played Counter-Strike for 20 years now.
20 years, yeah.
I played
Starcraft
21 even before Counter-Strike ever came out. So I mean, it's an interesting industry to be in at this point.
One of the things I think that made CS:GO so successful is they didn't try to make Counter-Strike 2. They just made Counter-Strike again. Yeah. Which I think was one of the key reasons why it succeeded. Like Starcraft has this weird problem where in Korea, the biggest game is StarCraft 1. Outside Korea, the biggest game is StarCraft 2.
I wonder if that pisses people off in Blizzard.
Oh, no. They
probably love it.
They're beside themselves because they wanted StarCraft 2 to basically overtake StarCraft 1. But if they really wanted to have a game that would just overtake StarCraft 1, they should have just made StarCraft Remastered.
Yeah.
And redone it again. Instead of necessarily trying to innovate. Now, I obviously like both of the games, but it is a funny situation where CS:GO, they didn't try to make
they didn't reinvent the wheel.
They didn't.
They just updated the wheel. They put some chains on that shit.
Exactly. Yeah. They just gave it a facelift, and it put the same game out there, and it succeeded. And I don't know. It's just something I wonder with Counter-Strike. Can they do it again? Can they remake it again? And
I think you could. And obviously, I guess I don't know anything about game development, but I know one thing that I've always been weirded out about is like the hit registry for 1.6 felt so good. And I feel like when you get to a certain point of updating graphics, like that engine to have the better graphics, it doesn't always have the same feeling of how accurate and how much hit registry there is. I know for CSGO, that was one of the weird feelings, the online CSGO at the start of it. It was like, this is kind of strange. Something feels like it's not connecting. Like the headshot animation, the headshot model, the hitboxes, something's off. And obviously they've tweaked and fixed it over time. But I would be curious about that because I see it on a smaller scale now. One of the things that they've been doing is like tweaking things like the economy system. Like you're not fucking with the actual gameplay itself, but like small tweak to the economy system, but it's a butterfly effect. Like you make the smallest change to the economy system, and we're in an era of professional CSGO now where pretty much universally the professional players and analysts are highly critical of the changes to the economy system. And that's a little bit more complex into the gameplay, but I mean, you want to think about trying to change a game that's been around for 20 years. Like, why would you ever do that? Like, that's a scary prospect. That takes some balls.
They had this with Starcraft 2 as well. There was some debate about if you're hitting two, because, you know, obviously you hit the keyboard very quickly in the game. With mechanical keyboards now, you can have several buttons pressed at the same time. And it'll
not
register.
Back in the day.
And you couldn't do that back in the day. And there was all this back and forth about whether or not we can allow that in Starcraft Remastered. And to be honest, I'm super old school. I thought it was a terrible idea, and then they updated it, and it feels amazing. Actually, the game runs much better. But
I was gonna say, as someone who's hardcore into Counter-Strike, I've had to bite the bullet and almost like publicly. Maybe not publicly, maybe just privately, but I've just, in my head, just like, apologize to the Valve devs and be like, I'm sorry, like you were right on this one. I shit on this decision at the time. I shit on it publicly, but privately, you were right.
I even had this with changing hotkeys in StarCraft Remastered. I thought, no, you can't do that. Like probe has to be where P is. You have to go all the way to that side of the keyboard if you're going to use it. And then after they updated it, and you could change all the hotkeys, I thought, oh, this is nice. No, I can actually move stuff around. I don't know why I was making it such a big deal.
Yeah, they've done good. Yeah. They done, I think that's the case with every. This is one area where I'm very happy where Valve is so hands off, because I think devs get so much shit for the changes they want to implement as a developer to games. I think most of it isn't that the change is bad. I think it's just change.
Yeah.
Not every time. I think there's been some obviously bad decisions made, but I think a lot of the times it's just pure change is like a hard thing to accept as a gamer, because you've been playing the game for, a year, 5 years, 6 years, or, whatever it might be, and you're just used to it this way.
What do you think about Riot's FPS game? That it looks sort of like almost like CS 1.6 with, I guess, Overwatch special effects.
Yep. I'm interested in it. I'm intrigued. Yeah. I'm intrigued to see what comes from it. I think part of the reason is they've actually done something very smart. We had one of the most legendary Counter-Strike 1.6 players who was actually a champion in 1.6, champion in Source, and a champion in CSGO, Volcano. Actually, maybe not a champion in CSGO. He was like very early on. He won a couple small regional things, but maybe not a world champion. He also developed one of the most popular Counter-Strike maps of Cache, which is used in competitive play. Riot brought him on, and he's a massive experience, super smart guy, super hardworking guy. So I know he's going to help them, steer that ship in the right direction. It looked, when I saw the release or the footage of it being released, it looked like it was still very far away from being actually ready for public consumption. My biggest fear about it, I hope it works, because I want there to be a competitor for Counter-Strike. I want to see what happens if there is. My biggest fear about it is I heard about that game being in development back in 2016. So I don't know how much they've had to restart or reboot over the years. I have to imagine if the game's taking 3 years to get to be developed, you have whole new engines, whole new hardware that's available to you. So much stuff changes. So I'm just wondering, how do you actually buckle down and get that game to release if it's already taken 3 years for you to get to a point where you can show anything publicly?
Yeah, and it didn't look like it was finished.
No.
At all.
But I think it has some people behind it, and obviously, I think Riot obviously did a good job with League of Legends as far as I know. I mean, I'm not involved in that scene, so I'm sure people in that scene would dispute that. But I think Riot's a pretty cool developer, and I hope it does well. And they've got good people behind it. I've met some of the devs outside of the Counter-Strike guy, Volcano. So I hope it does well. I don't subscribe to that world where, only like one FPS can be the winner. I don't think like, a rival game coming up is going to hurt Counter-Strike. I think it could only help improve getting more eyeballs on esports and more eyeballs. I think the best product is going to rise to the top. It's not about the game. It's about the kind of show and the kind of product that you're putting out to the publishers. It is a little about the game. I should say that.
How familiar are you with these other FPS games that are, for lack of better words, rip-offs of Counter-Strike? Like, are you familiar with Crossfire or Special Force?
I know of Crossfire, but no, I've never played any of them.
Because I was wondering if part of what Riot is doing is targeting these games. These games are all free, and a lot of them have microtransactions built into them, and they basically run on very low-end PCs.
Yeah.
And so, in all these marketplaces that you wouldn't think about, like Indonesia or
we talked about this on the train too, with like Africa being targeted for like mobile gaming just recently.
Like PUBG Mobile's huge in Africa.
Yeah, so is COD Mobile, I think it was as well.
Yeah, and I was just wondering if maybe Riot's also trying to target these other parts of the world by maybe making an FPS game that's not super high.
Yeah.
And like Overwatch, Overwatch is very colorful. The graphics are very strong. You need a certain type of PC to run it.
Yeah.
But if Riot is doing what I think they're doing, they're going to try to make something much more bare bones, much simpler, and try to hit a very wide audience.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I think in a world where esports, and especially in Counter-Strike with how oversaturated we are, TOs have a tough time, and even developers just saying we need to make, like, these are all businesses, they need to make money. So I don't think that's a problem at all that they're targeting any of those. I think it's a smart decision. I think the question always becomes, like, esports has become such a diluted term, and I don't know, like, if you even have like a definition in your head of what an esport is. But you always hear those arguments, like, I think the big one obviously is Fortnite an esport. I don't know how much it matters.
Here's my take on this.
Okay.
Does it run on a computer? Does it run on? Yes. That it's anything that's basically digital.
You don't think mobile gaming is an esport?
Yeah, it's an esport. No, that could be an esport because it's on. I mean, the phone's a computer basically.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Now I think that it is fair to say that there are certain tiers of games on how difficult they are. But
definitely. But I don't see the problem, like, with Fortnite. Like, I don't consider it an esport in the way that Counter-Strike is an esport. I feel like Counter-Strike is an esport more in line of like what a traditional sport is trying to be. I think Fortnite is an esport more for like marketing and money making.
Well, there's definitely,
which is absolutely fine.
Yeah, there's definitely an issue going on where everything, I've joked about this a lot with Artosis, but
buzzword,
everything becomes an esport.
Yeah, it's a very big buzzword
after a while.
At the moment. Yeah.
And for instance, both Starcraft and Counter-Strike, people were making tournaments before the developer had any idea what was going on. I mean, people were basically coming together.
The good old days, we call those.
And clamoring, yeah. So everybody plays this game. We need to figure out who's the best. We're going to have tournaments. Here's the maps we can use. Here's the shit you can't do. Let's get people together. And that's all very organic. But now I think because companies are realizing that esports is a thing, they feel like they have to put some of their marketing budget into quote unquote esports,
right,
whether it's going to succeed or not. Now, the Fortnite one, it's interesting because look, that game is not from our generation.
No, it's
right.
Not.
It's a battle royale. Battle royales have proven to be the most challenging esports to put on.
Yep.
It's the most complicated thing to produce on television.
Have you ever casted a battle royale game?
I have. I've casted PUBG in Korea. I did, I think, 2 seasons.
I casted Blackout, just not even a season. Just a one-day Blackout event.
What was that like for you? Coming from CS:GO.
It was fine because it was one day. Like, I think if I had to do it more and you had to put more thought into how to actually appropriately cast it, I think the problem was, the easy problem that I saw after just one day of doing it, because, as an FPS commentator, it's easy enough to do that just for a day. But it was just like, when you switch from, this, like, I think we were doing it had like Ninja, Shroud, Courage, all had like their own teams that they put together. It was like 4 streamer teams. And it was like, when you switch from Ninja's team into Shroud's team, I don't know what Shroud's been doing for the past 5 minutes. How are you supposed to build or narrate a story about what they've gone through? Like, that's the charm of like watching an esporter. For Starcraft, it's like, man, this motherfucker got like 8 drones fucking blown up in the first 10 minutes of this game, or the first 5 minutes of this game. Like, how is he ever going to recover from this? Like, that's the story you build up. And so when he eventually has success later on, you're just like, this is so incredible that he's able to overcome the economic disadvantage, blah, blah, blah. And when you're in PUBG or when you're in Blackout or any of those battle royale games and it's you switching to someone, you're like, I don't know if he got level 3 armor on the first box he opened. Like maybe
Yeah.
he's just been cruising. Maybe he got wrecked. Maybe he's had to scavenge some cool stuff. Like you just don't know. And I think that's the real struggle with Battle Royale is that it seems like it's like 5 different stories in the game being like patchwork together with tape rather than like having one cohesive Gorilla Glue story.
It is odd because there's so many teams that are going, and then sometimes you'll especially like before the game starts. I found that where I was the most disingenuous as a caster because I'm trying to talk about what this team might do or that team might do. Yeah. Then the game starts and they fucking land and die. Yeah. Immediately because they both went to the same.
So
2 teams,
20 minutes of pregame out the window.
Pregame, like I said, and then you have to have several games back to back. But the team that might win an entire tournament, the PUBG Global Finals is happening right now.
Right.
If I understand the format correctly, I mean we might have the team that wins the last match, they get the chicken dinner at the very end. They might not actually win the tournament. Yeah. They're gonna have to take all of the points from all the games and then collect them together. Yeah,
I know they were. That
seems antithetical.
Yeah,
to like an esport, like in CS:GO, the bomb blows up. Okay, the terrorists won.
Well, there's a reason that we don't in Counter-Strike do round robin format anymore. Is because every once in a while in a round robin format you have a game that just doesn't matter. Whether this team's already been qualified or this team's already knocked out, this game doesn't matter. And I feel like in PUBG you can run into that same situation where it's like it doesn't really matter who wins this game. This team's already won the tournament, and it's like, well, why am I watching this game?
Yeah, well, why are we doing this? Then?
Why are we going through this charade?
Now, one thing I will say though is I found battle royale games are actually enjoyable to watch. Though I have. Because OGN has been doing a PUBG league out here, and I will actually just sit on my couch and watch it and enjoy it. I find, because this was something everybody was joking about. I'm sure people were talking about this in CS:GO, but I know over in Starcraft we were making jokes like, no, there's no way that you're going to be able to put, this many people together, this many teams, and
in one physical location.
Yeah, and how are you're gonna watch it and how? But I found it to be pretty enjoyable actually.
I'm not gonna lie. I've never sat down and actually watched a whole battle royale tournament from start to finish. I've tuned in for a couple days, but I haven't really dabbled in PUBG a whole lot. Blackout was the one I stuck most of my time into, and they don't have tournaments anymore. So what can you do? I don't really know PUBG all that well. I know Pansy's working it. I feel like.
Pansy and Sims are at.
Yeah, they're casting this NA one that's going on right now. I feel like it's a big test for commentators. I think you'll see which commentators rise to the top. If you throw them into like a battle royale game, I feel like that's a pretty big test of how well you can tell a story and commentate. That's like the ultimate challenge.
Yeah, I think it takes a very different approach to covering stuff. And I found that I was using, because when I casted, they gave me one screen that just had the mini map.
Oh, good.
And I could
That's always fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I also had a second screen where I was looking in game, but actually this screen with the map made it so much easier.
Yeah.
Because then I could always just look and kind of talk in a
you could at least get a glimpse of the future. Be like, oh, they're at this spot on the map. Yeah. And like, they can eventually run into each other in the next 5 minutes or so if they go on the right pathing.
Is there any sense in Counter-Strike that battle royales are a threat?
No.
To there's not, right?
No. I mean, even Counter-Strike made a battle royale, never to be competitive. But it's got one. It's there. It's all right to play. But no, again, like I don't think we've ever looked at it in that way. At least I haven't. I know the other commentators haven't really. I've always looked at battle royales as like that is the streamer game. Like that is the ideal game for a streamer. I feel like.
Yeah, that maybe Hearthstone as well. Hearthstone's very easy to interact with chat.
You have enough downtime to like really, interact and have a good time and tell some jokes and be an idiot and be silly and have the personality shine through. And then you get those intense periods of action that, are pretty exciting. And then it calms down again while you loot and you kind of set up where you're going to go next. So I've always just looked at it as like an ideal streamer game. But I've never felt like, and I'll be honest, I was always amazed and I still am amazed at how little of a viewership hit Counter-Strike has always taken from not only how oversaturated our scene is, but I never noticed any kind of viewership drop outside of, maybe like the Fortnite World Championship. I can't remember what was going on that weekend, but like maybe when that big Worlds thing for Fortnite went on, but the average event, no. Our viewership's kept pretty steady in CS, so we're fortunate in that regard.
Yeah, do you think there's too many battle royales being made right now? I know we mentioned this briefly on the train. I've been kind of intrigued.
Yeah, I think I don't know about right now because I haven't really kept up with that side of the industry. But I know for a while it was just like, holy fuck, there's another BR. Like oh my god, COD's got one now. Yeah. PUBG has one. Fortnite obviously. Well, now the other thing we mentioned was obviously the auto chess.
Yeah.
That one's now like, oh, Epic's coming out with one. Auto Chess was there. Dota's got to make a new one.
Have you played those at all?
Yeah.
Are they fun?
We grind Underlords pretty hard because
Really?
we travel so much. So it's like, man, I've got a phone. I can play it on the airplane. It doesn't take a great Wi-Fi connection. So if you're some shit hotel in the middle of nowhere, you can still play it. And yeah, we've grinded it pretty hard for a few months, and I know Anders and I still play it pretty heavily and have a good time. They're fine, but I like every other game that is that level of complexity. Like when they come up, they just came up with like the big update for Underlords. It was literally called like the big update.
Oh, really?
And they added like 20 new characters and 5 different alliances and like a bunch of different items. And as someone who doesn't get a chance, like I can't grind it. I play it maybe like an hour here, like a game here, a game there, a game here, and a game there. I'm just like, this is so confusing to come back into. Even though I put 20 hours into it, the big update comes and it's like, well, I have to put at least 5 more hours into it just to understand the changes. And then I feel like I can play the game. So for me, it's just like some of these games are getting so complex. I'm just like, I just want a game that like can take my mind off of the travel, that is like just de-stressing at the end of the night. That's why I literally play ARAMs for League of Legends more than any other game.
Yeah.
Because I just get into a server. It's one lane. I know all the heroes.
Yeah.
And like, it's just like, I will just brawl for the next 20 minutes and good.
Do you play any other single player games?
I pretty much exclusively only play single player games.
What games are you playing lately?
Nothing lately. I just finally got into The Witcher 3. I played that out earlier this year.
I haven't played that yet. I heard it's fucking awesome though.
Yeah, that's the thing. Everyone told me it was amazing, and it is. It lived up to the hype. It lived up to the fucking hype, which rarely happens. But like Battlefield 1, I bought that just for the campaign. I buy the Battlefields, I buy Call of Duties just for the campaigns. I don't play any of the multiplayers. I'm gonna go home and buy this new Call of Duty that just came out because I haven't been home since it got released.
You haven't gotten to play Death Stranding yet, have you?
No, I haven't.
I don't know if you're a PlayStation person, but
I'm not.
Oh, you're not? Okay.
Which I haven't touched a console since Halo Reach in college.
Okay, so you're like PC Master Race
yeah,
guy.
Exactly.
Okay.
Well, I'm a PC Master Race and then Nintendo. Nintendo's always been my jam.
You got a Switch?
Yeah. And that's the only thing keeping me sane. I'm playing like some ninja game right now. I forget what it's called. My guilty pleasure in terms of esports outside of Starcraft is Smash Bros. If like
Melee or Ultimate?
Ultimate. Well, just any Smash Bros. I played the shit out of Smash Bros. In college. If Smash Brothers was a major in college, I would have a PhD.
Dude, my buddies,
I suck at it.
My buddies run tournaments for it out here.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I should hook you up or next time you come through here because they always have Smash tournaments.
I think Smash is the only esport where I literally keep on track of it with VODs. Like Starcraft, I'll catch the tournaments when they're on.
Yeah.
Counter-Strike, obviously, I know. League of Legends, I watched Worlds, but I don't really get a chance to watch. But like Smash, I'll go in a hotel room and I'll watch the VODs. Favorite player is Zach Ray. He's a fucking baller. A Japanese dude, plays Wolf.
Oh, dude, Smash is such a good game. It's so different. It's so nobody's even trying to make something like Smash. It's right. It is a 2D fighter, but the idea of trying to get your opponent off the screen,
it's genius.
It's genius.
Yes, it's so good. I love everything about it. And you know what I think the best thing that ever happened to Smash? Did you ever watch that documentary, the Smash documentary?
Smash Brothers.
Was that the one?
That's the name.
They had like a 6-part documentary series that came out.
It's the greatest esports documentary of all time.
Holy fucking shit. Like that was just like a random fan-made documentary. Homeboy raised money.
It was so good.
And I didn't even, I could not believe how good that was. And that got me so hyped. And ever since I saw that, I've been watching Smash. So in my brain, when I try and extrapolate that to Counter-Strike, I'm like, why has no one made that documentary? We have all these
that's
TOs.
A good point.
We have so many TOs just cranking millions of dollars, just throwing millions at running these big arena events. And I'm like, why has no TO started making these documentaries and been like, fall in love with the players, fall in love with the teams, fall in love with the stories, and then you'll learn to love the game. But that's the easiest in for the casual fan, is finding that one player that they can identify with, that one player who had a similar difficulty earlier. Like, my parents got divorced and I was super depressed. So I got into Counter-Strike and that was the only thing that made me feel happy for like 6 months. And then I just got really good. And now I'm a pro player. There's some people who identify with that story versus just being like, oh, here's 13,000 people inside of an arena. I think we're losing, especially in Counter-Strike, it feels like we're losing that touch with like the core esports side of what made our game so big and so popular. And I'm wondering why that content isn't made. Well, actually, I know why, but
What? Just because they're too focused on events?
I've pitched that content, and I know a lot of TOs that I've spoken to. Like the number one thing, it's not always verbatim, but like the number one sentiment is always just like, why am I going to pay $5, $6, $7 grand to make this content when there's 20 other TOs in the space who are going to benefit from it as well.
Oh, wow. Okay. I hadn't thought of that.
Because which, by the way, I don't have a legitimate argument against that complaint.
Yeah.
I don't have a way to argue against it. I think it's entirely a fair discussion point.
Blizzard did a good job with the, I could show you the videos after, but these WCS Signature Series videos, where it's like a very small biopic of a player, but it gets people behind these guys.
I know when we had majors, Valve did like little 5-minute videos on their Valve profile pieces. They picked like 5 players a major. They've stopped doing them, but even those were just like very surface level.
Yeah.
Like nothing really diving too deep into what made this player so special. Is just like, here's this player who's super popular, who's very, very good. This is his home life. Enjoy. But like we haven't had any kind of content like that dive very deep. And that is probably, in my mind, and obviously I come from the angle of, a commentator and a content creator for TOs, is that's the biggest thing in my mind that's been missing from the Counter-Strike scene.
Yeah, it's funny what type of content is out there.
Yeah.
Because we have all big tournaments, arenas.
That's a horn.
Sorry, I don't know if you can edit that out. We have these big tournaments. We have arenas. And, of course, you can stream and get very intimate with watching somebody play. But part of the reason why I even wanted to start doing this podcast is that there's no footage of just, like, for instance, 2 casters talking about the industry or talking about, I'm from Starcraft, you're from Counter-Strike. There's nothing like this out here. And I totally agree. There's not enough, especially in Counter-Strike and any kind of biopic stuff on players or on teams, because what this Smash Brothers documentary, Ryan, can you look this up? Just go to YouTube. I just want to see if I got the name right, so if people are listening.
So you're the Jamie.
Yeah, this is young Jamie over here. Basically, that got so many people involved in Smash, because if you didn't know the history, then you could watch it.
Bro, it was.
Am I right? It is called the Smash Brothers. Okay,
it's so genius watching that, because it talks about like all the different the top like 5 or 6 Smash Bros from that era, that generation,
and they really capture East Coast versus West Coast.
And which is awesome. Obviously, fucking hip hop did that great as well.
Yeah.
But also like their gameplay, like the style of their gameplay and how it matches with their personality. And we have guys like that in Counter-Strike, and I'm just like, man, I'm so fucking jealous.
Yeah.
I'm a big outside of esports, I'm a big history buff. So one thing that I wanted to do, I produced my own video for Counter-Strike about beginning of 2017, so like 2.5-3 years ago about this point, just out of my own pocket, way too expensive, which is why I haven't been able to kind of continue it. But it is just kind of like, NFL's greatest games, where they go and they talk about like, the Bears versus the Packers from like the 1980s or something, or they'll do like a 1-hour episode on like the 1985 Bears. You could do that so easily in a game like Counter-Strike. You could do it easily in a game like Starcraft, where you have such a rich, like we have games that have such rich histories, and players that were playing 10 years ago are still playing today, still competing today. And we're not, what a resource that is that no one's tapping into appropriately. What other esport has that?
Well, that's the beautiful thing about our games, is that they are. I mean, I kind of chuckle when I see somebody saying, "This guy's an Overwatch legend," and I'm like, "Well, I mean,
we're using Legend
like
very
2 years,
we're
Legend."
We're using Legend
nothing
very
against
loosely.
Overwatch in this sense, but it's just like, okay, but I mean, do you know what a good Starcraft player looked like 2 years into the game? They fucking sucked.
But that's what it goes back to when I was saying, like, we in esports, we love hand jobs. Like those we exist in a world where hyperbole is now just the natural way of describing things, and it's like, come on, like we can't dilute these words for everyone. It's not even trying to disparage you. It's just, can we not call everyone a legend?
Yeah,
especially that word. It's just like,
it's
everyone's
a
a legend.
What the fuck does legend mean to you? I mean, look, he's the best Genji player. Okay, but legend, I mean, this is, it
exists over periods of time. There is a time factor in this one.
Well, look, I think I don't want to make you late for your girlfriend, so
let's talk. We got
this is what we're going to do is we're going to go to, I think, an after show now, which is just like
cool.
a little bit longer, and just for people that pay on Patreon. But dude, this was a really good episode, man. Thank you so much for doing this,
brother.
man.
No, thanks for having me. I not to go back to the conversation we had on the train, and not to gush over you or anything, but when I lived with my brother, we used to tune in you and Dan watch casting Starcraft all the time. We'd make dinner and we'd sit there and watch.
Oh, that's so cool, man.
GSL replays and all the Starcraft replays. And everything.
That's so cool, man.
This is awesome for me. Thanks,
dude. Well, thanks so much for doing it, man. All right, guys, we're gonna go to the after show now. For Patreon donors. Thanks again for doing this.
Cheers.
Okay, that does it for our episode Can you believe how much they travel? I knew that CSGO casters travel a lot. I mean, there's always events going on. I did not actually fully understand until he explained it to me how much he's on the road. That is crazy, man. That is a totally different life, man. I hope he is doing well. He should be casting. I think he was casting in Shanghai. He was leaving Korea to go to Shanghai, and he's probably going to continue to tour around for a little bit. So best wishes to your traveling, Moses. Thanks again for doing this episode. We're going to be back next week with another episode here, as there is basically no work for me right now. We're in the off season. Quick reminder, I do have the KSL Finals. That is on the 29th in the evening here in Korea. If you're in Seoul, you're welcome to come down to the studio. If not, definitely check it out, because that is the last major StarCraft event until we renew WCS and ASL and KSL for next year. So if you're jonesing for some StarCraft, this is your last shot. So, guys, again, we're going to have the after show for Patreon supporters. If you want to go check that out, go to patreon.com/Tasteless Podcast. And I love you guys. Thank you so much for joining me. I will see you guys again next week. This episode was produced by State, artwork by Alaris, music by Mark Lentz. A special thanks to our top supporters on Patreon: Seth Rohit Sambadi, Charlie Sheaver, John Kernicki, and Tyler Tebow Baggins Radsek.